Matt, I remember interviewing then candidate Joe Biden from his basement. It was before basement television had figured out a way around the lags. And he was really making a bet that safety and protecting one's family, while being the right thing to do from a public health standpoint, would also pay dividends politically. With the plurality of Republicans supporting his vaccine rollout and 67% of all Americans, it's impossible to explain how big that number is in this polarized country. You've got almost 70% of Americans supporting the coronavirus package that 0 Republicans voted for. How's the White House feel right now?
Very good, Nicolle. I mean, the White House and Biden, as you point out, has believed from the start that of anything, he's going to be judged on how he handles the coronavirus. There was a moment in the campaign where everything sort of pivoted to that as a critical issue. And in Biden's first in the months leading up to him taking office and in the months since, that has been the dominant issue that the White House has poured their energy into. And the numbers are good any which way you look at them. The coronavirus package that he passed with 2/3 approving of that, and him getting credit for the rollout of vaccine manufacturing and distribution. And so I think that the question now for the White House is how they build upon these early numbers that are quite good and how they take that into the next sort of congressional package that they're trying to push. It's also indicative of congressional numbers, and the congressional approval ratings in these new polls are also quite good for Democrats, which gets into an argument that the Biden White House has been making to Democrats to keep the party united, that in the midterms they will all rise together or fall together. And right now they're clearly rising. And I think that's a message that the White House will continue to push with Democrats on Capitol Hill as they turn toward this next package of legislation.
I want to just put up some of things I think candidates, some of this is from after he became president for you, Ben, just the bet that the president made on public messaging around science and the scientists.
Let me be clear. We are going to do this the right way. The FDA will decide on emergency use authorization of a vaccine based on science, not due to any political pressure from me or anyone else. Look, we know what we need to do to beat this virus. Tell the truth. Follow the scientists and the science. Work together. Put trust and faith in our government to fulfill its most important function, which is protecting the American people. No function more important. If we keep our guard up, stick together, and stick with the science, we can look forward to a 4th of July that feels a bit more normal.
So, Ben, you had a communications job in a White House, so I feel like we can have this conversation. It usually falls to a communicator to check a speech to make sure that it's about the public, to make sure it's about the country. I don't even know if someone has to do that kind of checking for this president. He has not given a speech about himself since he's been there. Everything he said about the virus has been about beating the virus so that people can get back to their lives, about the sort of path to economic recovery, winding its way through defeating the virus. Where do you sort of judge the messaging as a reflection of the poll numbers?
Well, Nicolle, I think they've done an extraordinary job in their messaging. You know, you and I worked in White Houses in a communications function for 2 very different presidents. But I think there's 3 attributes that come across in the Biden team's messaging and President Biden's messaging. One is he's talking about what people care about. You know, Donald Trump would wake up and tweet about whatever was on his mind. Joe Biden is talking about the pandemic. He's talking about the economy. He's connecting with what people around this country are thinking about. The second is he's doing exactly what he said he would do. You know, he said he would prioritize the virus. He did that. He said he would get shots in arms and checks to Americans. He did that. He said that the package would be $1.9 trillion. That's what the package was. He said he'd listen to the science. And so even when you had this somewhat controversial decision to take a hold on Johnson & Johnson, people knew that that was the approach he was going to take. And the third thing he's done so well, Nicolle, I think, is he's defined for the public what success is going to be for him. You know, they were relentless in hitting these points, that this presidency is going to be about COVID. It's going to be about the economy, first and foremost. Then it's going to be about climate change and racial justice. And everything they do connects to their core values, the core things that they said they do, the core priorities that they said they were taking into their presidency. So I think Americans can feel very assured that this is a crew that knows what they're doing, that is clear about what they're doing, that does what they say. And they don't even really need to draw the contrast with the last people who are not.
Well, and to be perfectly blunt about it, Rev, the heat and the energy and the excitement on the other side of the aisle is around the lunacy of the insurrection and around voter suppression. Here's where all the heat is. Ted Cruz raised $5.3 million in the first quarter. Josh raised fist Hawley raised $3 million. Wackadoo QAnon lady raised $3.2 million. Here's John Boehner pulling no punches on just how loathsome one of them is.
I don't beat anybody up. It's not really my style, except that jerk. Perfect symbol, you know, of getting elected, make a lot of noise, draw a lot of attention to yourself, raise a lot of money, which means you're going to go make more noise, raise more money.
So I would do a multiple choice and let you decide which one of the ones I named he was talking about, but I'll be a spoiler here. It was Ted Cruz. But that's where the energy and excitement is on the right, around the most radical, the least. I mean, Ted Cruz, in a very understandable way, abandoned his own state when all the lights were out, went to Mexico, blamed his daughters, and he still remains sort of a proud member of the anti-democratic caucus, the sedition caucus.
And the thing that you need to really put in perspective, all that you've said and our colleagues have said just now are correct. But let us remember, this is all being done while over 500,000 Americans have died. It would be bad if we were in what would be considered normal. But you have almost 500,000, more than 500,000 people dead, millions infected. And how do they think American families, all of whom either someone in the family or someone they know are infected or even dead, feel when they hear all of this nonsense that they're running compared to a president who has gotten the vaccines out, who said what he would do in the 100 days, the first 100 days, he beat his own deadline, and he's not out there talking about himself, as you said, or talking nonsense. He's dealing with something that is immediate in front of everybody every day, is how am I going to survive this? What about my cousin that's infected? What about my neighbor that died? He's dealing directly to where people on the ground are being impacted while they're running around saying the most provocative, outrageous thing they could say to raise money, like they're in an alternative universe, and really are tone deaf to what American people of all communities are feeling right now. And that is that we're trying to survive and ride out this pandemic.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.